Hello everyone. I wanted to do a quick video on how to use Laravel Livewire. It's an interesting concept where it bridges the server side with the client side. So it's a little bit easier to do full stack development for simple things. And I'll say that because I've run into issues where if you want to do things that are a little bit more complex, Livewire just gets crazy complex very fast. Typically, when you're doing web application development, you have to create the front end and the back end completely separate. Livewire unifies that complete experience, so there's an advantage there. Assuming that what you're using Livewire is for something fairly simple. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate that.
If you haven't already done so, please hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell button so you know when my latest videos come out. And if you have any questions or feedback about this video, please comment and I'll respond.
So right here is an example of a search engine that uses the iTunes Search API, and I'm going to demonstrate the code for that. First of all, this is how it looks like initially. You put in your search term. In this case, I will put Michael Bublé, and then you'll see all the search results for that with the little example for a preview of the audio. If I go back and I search for Michael, other things will come up, including video previews, such as this movie preview. And then I have a button that goes ahead and opens it up in the what used to be iTunes, now it's the music app. So I'll show you how I went ahead and did that in Livewire. So Livewire is composed of a class that handles all the server-side interactions. And the interesting thing is that because there's two-way binding, you can have, for instance, a variable that gets changed on the server side, and then that change will reflect on the client side. So, for instance, there's this search property that is public, and any public property on a Livewire component class gets automatically included into the view of the component itself. So the component itself will look like this. Pretty standard. You have your blade, what do you call them? Directives. I will call them blade directives here. And if you see here, you have your double curly braces to output certain variables and whatnot. That's pretty common. You're aware of that. What's interesting is this new attribute, HTML attribute here called wire, and that's what manages the state for Livewire. So if you do wire :model, and then you name it something, and I'll drop this part, then it'll tie the component property that was public that we saw the last time over here to the blade view. Now, the only thing that you need to do in this case is pass in and view data that takes into account the search variable or search property in the class, which is automatically hydrated when the user types into the input text field, because like I mentioned before, there was that special HTML attribute of the wire model which tied that specific variable to the class. So every time somebody types in something, after a few milliseconds, the render function of the Livewire component will be called over here. Specifically, by default, it's every 150 milliseconds, and that can be configured. But once they type something in, the render method gets called. Then in this case, I'm calling another method called search iTunes, which first checks if there's any value in the search property. And then it does a HTTP get with a couple of query parameters, sending over the term, and then it grabs the results. If there isn't any value in the search property, an empty array is returned. And remember that this gets called every time that the user types in something into the input field. So it's happening in real time. The way that happens is that Livewire intelligently tracks changes, and when it notices a change in the DOM, then it issues an AJAX query, and then it sends along the current state, and then the server responds with the AJAX query, and Livewire intelligently does a DOM diff, like React diff. I'm sure there's differences, but you can conceptually think of it like that. So if there's a change, then it'll change the parts of the DOM that it needs to change. That's how it's able to dynamically update the DOM to show the results that came from the AJAX request, which we've already seen here. So like if I do Buble, this issues a AJAX request, and then the results are automatically applied to the DOM. And we can actually see that AJAX request down here. You can see, well, I'll get to that at some point. But what you've seen already is that at some point it was working. But yeah, here it goes. Michael Bublé, and yeah, it's doing the AJAX request and hydrating the DOM. So the important parts here are the wire attribute, wire model attribute. This value here matches whatever's in the component, which in this case I have it called as search iTunes. Search iTunes. So it's that public property there. And in the blade template, you need to have a root element, similar to how React also requires you to have a root element. That's how it's able to track the changes. Now, if you don't have a root element, basically what happens is no changes are tracked. And so if you ever have that issue, it's probably because of that. You don't have a root element applied. And that is pretty much it, what you need. Oh no, one more thing. In a layout property or a layout blade, you need to include the Livewire styles and most importantly, Livewire scripts. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and down in the description, I'll have a link to an article with the source code.